Clara, a 24-year-old girl, has always dreamed of a life of glamour and wealth. Growing up in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Warsaw, she watched the luxurious world of the elite from afar, feeling that it would never be accessible to someone like her. Working as a clerk in a department store, his life was marked by routine and a lack of great emotions. But everything changed one ordinary afternoon, when he overheard two clients talking about an exclusive gala that would be held by one of the richest men in Poland, the enigmatic millionaire Philip Nowak. This event, which brought together the most influential personalities in the country, seemed so far from Clara's reality that she didn't even dare to dream of participating. However, a bold idea began to form in his mind. Clara, always observant, knew that Philip Nowak was known for his private personal life and rumors of a secret engagement to a woman no one knew publicly. Inspired by this, she came up with the idea of posing as this mysterious bride, knowing that if she played the role correctly, she could infiltrate the prestigious event. The idea seemed completely absurd, but Clara, driven by a desire to escape her monotonous life, began to draw up a detailed plan. With a quick search, she discovered the event location and, with the help of a friend who worked in a couture dress store, managed to find a stunning dress. Clara knew that for her plan to work, she would need to carry herself with confidence and elegance, something she had always admired in high society women. Even without being recognized, Philip Nowak's fiancé's anonymity worked in her favor, and she planned to use this to her advantage. Upon entering the event, Clara's heart was racing. She walked through reception with her head held high, walking as if she belonged in that world even though every fiber of her being knew it was a fake. The security guards looked at her, but didn't question her. After all, everyone expected to see Philip Nowak's mysterious bride, and Clara played her role perfectly. As she entered the main hall, eyes turned to her. She looked stunning in her dress, and the aura of mystery that surrounded her only increased everyone's curiosity. The atmosphere at the event was everything Clara had imagined and more. The hall sparkled with crystal chandeliers, and the tables were adorned with exotic flowers. Guests wore designer clothes, chatting in groups about million-dollar deals and luxurious vacation destinations. Clara, with a confident smile, mingled with the crowd, enchanted by the grandeur of what she saw. However, a feeling of tension did not leave her. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground, and any slip-up could reveal her true identity. At the height of the night, as Clara was talking to a group of businessmen, a deep, familiar voice sounded behind her. "So we finally meet." A chill ran down her spine as she turned and came face to face with Philip Nowak. The man stood before her, his eyes fixed on hers, with an expression that mixed curiosity and suspicion. Clara, trying to remain calm, smiled. But in that moment, she knew her charade was about to be put to the test in a way she had never anticipated. Clara felt her blood run cold when Philip Nowak's eyes met hers. She never imagined she would be confronted by the millionaire himself so early in the night. Trying to hide her apprehension, she smiled softly, as if she was completely in control of the situation. But inside, anxiety was growing. Philip, with his imposing presence and a gaze that seemed to penetrate your soul, was not the type of man who was easy to deceive. Clara knew that the slightest mistake at that moment could reveal her true identity. Philip took a step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "So, you're the woman everyone talks about," he said, with a tone that didn't reveal whether he was intrigued or irritated. Clara swallowed hard but maintained her composure. "It seems so," she replied, trying to sound confident. However, her heart was beating so loudly that she was afraid everyone around would hear it. The room was full of curious eyes, attentive to the interaction between the two, since, for everyone, it was the first time that Philip presented his supposed bride in public. For a brief moment, the silence between them was disconcerting. Philip seemed to be sizing her up, as if trying to figure out if the woman in front of him was really who she said she was. Clara, in turn, felt like she was on a tightrope, trying to balance herself between the lie she had constructed and the imminent truth. "You're exactly as I imagined," Philip said, breaking the silence. His tone was enigmatic, which left Clara even more disconcerted. "And how exactly did you imagine me?" she replied, trying to stall for time while looking for a way to control the situation. Philip smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mysterious, quiet, always avoiding the press," he said with a slight touch of irony. "I was starting to think you were just a rumor." Clara stood her ground. She knew she was walking a fine line, but there was something in Philip's gaze that made her think he was also playing a game, testing her in some way. It was almost as if he knew something wasn't right, but was curious to see where this situation would go. As the two continued talking, the surrounding guests became more and more fascinated by their exchange of words. No one dared to interrupt. After all, this was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The first glimpse of Philip Nowak's mysterious bride. Clara, despite her nervousness, began to realize that she still had a chance to continue her charade. Philip, it seemed, was as interested in keeping up appearances as she was. Maybe, Clara thought, he had his own reasons for letting that lie continue. The tension between them was palpable, but Philip did not confront it directly. He simply observed her, evaluating her responses and reactions. "Why don't you join me for a more private conversation?" he said, finally, breaking the circle of curiosity around him. Philip's invitation took Clara by surprise, but she knew she couldn't back down now. With a controlled smile, she nodded, and together, they walked towards a more private area of the room. As they continued away from the watchful eyes of the other guests, Clara felt the adrenaline rush through her veins. She knew she was approaching a crucial point. Philip was about to confront her for real, and she didn't know what he was up to. All he could do was keep playing the game, hoping that he would somehow manage to escape before his true identity was revealed. Upon entering the private room, Clara felt the weight of the silence between her and Philip increase. The room was luxuriously decorated, with leather sofas and a glass table in the center. The soft lights created an intimate atmosphere, but for Clara, what stood out most was the absence of any other gaze other than Philip's. They were finally alone, and Clara knew the truth was about to come out, one way or another. Philip closed the door behind him, and the dry sound echoed throughout the room, intensifying the atmosphere of tension. He slowly walked to one of the sofas and sat down, indicating with a gesture that Clara should do the same. She hesitated for a brief moment, but then sat down facing him. Her heart was still racing, but she remained firm, willing to face whatever came. Philip watched her with a look that mixed curiosity and suspicion. "So," he began, casually crossing his legs, "who are you really?" The question, although direct, was not asked with hostility. There was something almost amused in Philip's tone, as if he already knew the answer and was just waiting to see how Clara would react. She knew there was no point in lying again. He had seen through the charade, and now the only thing left for her was to try and find out how far he was willing to take this. "Do you really want to know who I am?" Clara asked, challenging him with a look. Philip raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I already know you're not who everyone thinks you are," he replied calmly. Clara took a deep breath. The truth was about to be revealed, but she still didn't know what Philip wanted with it. "My name is Clara," she said finally. "And no, I'm not your fiancé. I impersonated her to be here tonight. But believe me, I didn't plan any of this. It was an impulsive idea, which maybe went too far." Philip listened to her attentively, and when she finished, he laughed softly, surprising her. "I was already suspicious. After all, it wouldn't be the first time someone tried to infiltrate one of these events," he said, still with a smile on his face. His reaction took Clara by surprise. She expected anger, confrontation, perhaps even immediate expulsion from the event. But Philip seemed more amused than irritated. "So why did you do that?" he asked, genuinely curious. Clara thought for a moment before responding. "Because I wanted, for one night, to feel what it's like to be in your world, to live a life of luxury and glamour, even if it was just for a few hours. I know it may sound silly, but it's the truth." Philip was silent for a few seconds, absorbing Clara's words. "And you did it," he said finally. "Here you are, dressed as one of Poland's most influential women, at one of the country's most exclusive events." But there's one thing you didn't expect, right? Clara looked at him, confused. And what would that be? She asked. Philip leaned forward, his gaze intensifying. You didn't expect me to let you continue this charade. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Was this the moment he would unmask her? But instead, Philip smiled again, an enigmatic smile. However, I will make you a proposition, he said, his tone now more serious. You will stay here tonight, continue pretending to be my bride. No one needs to know the truth. And in return, I will tell you why I am playing this game. Philip's offer was intriguing and frightening at the same time. Clara knew she was getting involved in something much bigger than she imagined. But at that moment, she had no choice but to accept it. She nodded, not knowing exactly what she was getting herself into, but certain that Philip had his own secrets to hide. The game was just beginning. Clara left the private room next to Philip, her heart still racing, but now feeling a new kind of adrenaline. The agreement between the two had completely changed the dynamics of the night. Philip had made her promise to continue the charade for the remainder of the event, and in return, he had offered her a glimpse into the secrets surrounding his personal life. As they returned to the main hall, she knew that, as risky as it was, the mystery surrounding Philip Nowak was something she couldn't resist exploring. Upon entering the room again, the guests' eyes turned to the couple. Clara, although still nervous, tried her best to appear at ease. She kept her smile and followed Philip, who led her safely through the guests. The murmurs were noticeable. After all, this was the first time that many had seen the millionaire's supposed bride in public. Philip, with his natural charisma, greeted some influential figures and exchanged a few words with other businesspeople present. He seemed completely at ease in the role he was playing. The tension Clara felt began to lessen as time passed and no one questioned her. People looked at her curiously, but accepted her presence at Philip's side without suspecting the charade. The confidence that Philip showed at his side was enough to dispel any doubts that might arise among the guests. Deep down, Clara knew that his credibility was her best defense that night. As long as he treated her as his bride, no one would dare doubt it. As they talked to different groups, Clara realized that Philip was also testing her, observing how she handled social interactions and how she reacted to the attention of others. With each conversation, she did better than expected, maintaining her composure and subtly answering questions about her life and her relationship with Philip. She created impromptu stories about how they met and how they had kept their relationship out of the spotlight. Philip, in turn, complimented his lines in a convincing way, making the farce increasingly solid. Clara, despite her initial nervousness, began to feel confident in her role. The world of high society, which had once seemed so inaccessible, was now within reach, if only temporarily. She found herself enchanted by the luxury around her. The jewelry, the elegant clothes, the conversations about million-dollar deals. It was a completely different reality from hers, but that night, she was part of that universe. Alongside Philip, Clara was able to live the dream she had always wanted, even though she knew it was all a big lie. However, there was something about Philip that continued to intrigue her. He wasn't just a millionaire surrounded by luxury. The way he observed people, the way he conducted conversations, and the way he maintained control of each situation made Clara realize that there was much more at stake that night than just a social event. What did Philip really want from that deal? Why was he willing to keep up the charade rather than expose it? These questions echoed in Clara's mind, but she knew she would have to wait for the right moment to find out the answers. The night progressed, and the event reached its climax. Clara knew that time was running out, and that soon she would have to face whatever Philip was planning. The deal they made was risky, and at any moment something could go wrong. But for now, she was willing to keep playing the game, at least until Philip revealed what was really on his mind. As the event continued, Clara began to notice that there was something else going on that night. Philip, who had previously seemed completely at ease, was now a little more tense. Although he maintained his composure in social interactions, Clara noticed that his eyes were constantly scanning the room, as if he were looking for someone. He also began to be more brief in conversations, showing less interest in business and more concern for the surrounding environment. Clara, intrigued, tried to hide her curiosity, but couldn't help but ask, "Is everything okay? It looks like you're waiting for something to happen." Philip, for a brief moment, hesitated to respond. He looked at her with the same enigmatic look as before, as if pondering how much he should tell her. "You're more perceptive than I realized," he said, with a slight smile. "But yes, let's just say there's more to this night than just the glamour and the talk." The vague answer only increased Clara's curiosity. Philip was clearly playing a more complex game, and she had no idea what was really at stake. "And what exactly are you waiting for?" she pressed, trying to get more information. Philip looked at her again, this time with an expression that mixed seriousness and caution. "There are certain people who shouldn't be here, and they know it. I'm just watching." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. There was something much bigger going on at this event, something that Philip seemed to be trying to control. She knew she should keep her distance from this kind of intrigue, but at the same time, she was too involved to simply ignore what was happening. The feeling that something was about to happen only grew as the night progressed, and Clara began to question whether the deal she had made with Philip was really a good idea. As the minutes passed, Clara noticed the presence of some figures who seemed out of place at the event. There was a group of men who, although well-dressed, seemed more attentive to the movements of others than interested in the conversations or the surrounding environment. They kept their distance, but their gazes were sharp and calculating. Clara noticed that Philip, from time to time, looked in their direction, although without making direct eye contact. Finally, Philip approached Clara and said in a low tone, "It's best if you stay close to me for the rest of the night. Things could get complicated." The warning made her even more uneasy, but she maintained her stance, willing to follow the game until the end. Philip knew much more than he was letting on, and Clara was now at the center of something she never could have predicted. The role of bride, that she had assumed as part of a charade, now seemed to be much more dangerous than she imagined. As the event approached its climax, Clara knew she was about to witness something important. The tension in the room was increasing, and Philip's calculating look revealed that he was prepared for anything that happened. Clara, in turn, took a deep breath and prepared herself for what came next, knowing that, one way or another, her night was far from ending safely. As the event approached its end, the tension that permeated the environment only increased. The guests continued their conversations and enjoyed the luxurious atmosphere, oblivious to what was about to happen. But Clara, now at Philip's side, knew something was about to fall apart. Philip was more attentive than ever, and the presence of the mysterious men in the hall seemed to be weighing on him. She could feel the tension growing by the minute, as if something imminent was about to happen. Then, in an instant, the atmosphere changed. One of the men Clara had noticed earlier began moving toward Philip, a grim expression on his face. Philip, aware of the approach, remained calm, but Clara saw the muscle in his jaw twitch, indicating that he was ready for a confrontation. The man got close enough that only Philip and Clara could hear him. "The time has come, no whack," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You know you can't escape this." Philip didn't respond immediately. Instead, he lifted his chin and looked straight into the man's eyes. "I wasn't trying to escape," Philip replied calmly, "but I think you underestimated my willingness to face this." Philip's tone was cool and controlled, but Clara could feel the rising tension. She didn't know what was going on, but it was clear that Philip was involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. Before the man could respond, Philip turned to Clara. "I need you to get out of here," he said, his voice now more urgent. "Go to the exit and don't look back. This isn't a game anymore." Clara, although scared, hesitated. She knew she was in a dangerous situation, but the mystery surrounding Philip and what was happening held her back. "What's going on, Philip?" she asked, trying to understand, but he had no time for explanations. "Just go, Clara," he insisted, and this time, his tone left no room for argument. Reluctantly, Clara started to walk away, but as she moved towards the exit, she heard a commotion forming behind her. Several of the mysterious men began to move, and the sound of raised voices echoed throughout the hall. She looked over her shoulder and saw Philip being surrounded by them, but he didn't look scared. On the contrary, Philip maintained a firm posture, as if he was prepared for the confrontation that was unfolding. Clara, feeling fear rising within her, continued towards the exit. However, before reaching the door, one of the men blocked his path. He looked her up and down, as if he knew exactly who she was. "Are you part of this too?" he asked with a threatening expression. Clara shook her head, feeling her panic rising. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to remain calm. But the man didn't seem convinced. "Let's see what Nowak has to say about that," he said, taking Clara by the arm and leading her back to the ballroom. Back at the center of the event, Clara found herself caught in the middle of a dangerous game. Philip was now surrounded by men, but his expression was that of someone who had everything under control. He saw her being brought back and, with a firm expression, told the man, "She had nothing to do with this. If anyone here is going to face the consequences, it's me." The man hesitated for a moment, but then nodded, releasing Clara. "Very well, Nowak," he said, before motioning to his companions. The tension in the air was palpable, and Clara knew she was one step away from something big, something that would change everything. Philip, it seemed, was about to make a decisive move, and Clara found herself caught in the middle of a power play far greater than anything she could have predicted. The imminent confrontation that Clara witnessed in the gala was just the beginning of something much more complex. Philip Nowak, who until then seemed to be just a mysterious millionaire, was involved in an intricate web of secrets and conspiracies. As the men surrounded him, Clara realized that she had gotten herself into something much more dangerous than a simple farce at a social event. Philip, however, maintained his calm posture, as if everything was part of a bigger plan. One of the men surrounding Philip stepped forward, and his voice echoed through the silent hall. "Now that the charade is over, Philip, why don't you tell us the truth? Everyone here knows you're hiding something, and tonight won't be about business or social conventions anymore." Clara, still scared and trapped in that situation, watched carefully. Who were these men, and what exactly was Philip hiding? It was obvious that he wasn't just an ordinary businessman. There was something much darker at play. Philip crossed his arms, showing no fear or hesitation. "You think you know everything," he began, his tone sharp, "but they underestimate how prepared I was for this moment." Philip's words made the men suspicious, and the silence that followed was piercing. Clara could barely breathe, fearing what might happen next. Philip looked at her for a brief moment, as if to make sure she understood that, despite everything, he was still in control of the situation. Suddenly, the doors of the hall opened forcefully, and a group of men dressed in elegant suits but with an air of authority entered. They were no ordinary guests. Clara immediately realized that they were security guards or, perhaps, agents from some important agency. The men surrounding Philip looked at each other uneasily, realizing that the game had changed. Philip smiled in a discreet manner, finally revealing the extent of his plan. "You've gone too far," he said calmly, "and now they will have to face the consequences." Clara watched, not believing what she saw. The sudden entry of those agents had completely changed the course of events. The men surrounding Philip began to retreat, understanding that the situation had gotten out of their control. One of the agents approached Philip, exchanging a few quick words with him before turning to the other men. "You are in custody. Your actions here will not go unnoticed," the agent said firmly. As the men were escorted out of the room, Clara finally began to understand what was happening. Philip, all along, knew that confrontation would happen. He had planned every detail of the night, making sure the right people were there to intervene at the exact right moment. Clara, still in shock, felt a mixture of relief and confusion. "What was that?" she asked, finally finding her voice. Philip looked at her with a softer expression now. "A dangerous game that I needed to end, and you, unintentionally, ended up being part of it." Clara was confused, but relieved that everything had ended without violence. "So what are you going to do now?" she asked, still trying to process everything. Philip watched her for a moment, as if considering her response. "Now," he said with an enigmatic smile, "I think we'll go back to the ball and end the night as it began in style." After the confusion had cleared, Clara was still stunned by what had just happened. She found herself in the middle of a conspiracy bigger than anything she could imagine. And the man in front of her, Philip Nowak, was not just a millionaire. He was someone who played a dangerous game with powers that Clara didn't yet fully understand. Even so, the relief that everything had ended without violence was present. Philip, on the other hand, seemed unfazed, as if that night had gone exactly as he had predicted. Upon returning to the hall, the guests, who had previously been curious and carefully watched the steps of Philip and his supposed bride, seemed oblivious to what had happened. The gala atmosphere, laughter, and sophisticated conversation continued as if nothing had happened. Clara, trying to process the turn of events that night, felt a whirlwind of thoughts running through her mind. She looked at Philip, trying to find answers in his calm face. "So, that's it? You played a dangerous game with those men and it ended like this?" she asked, still perplexed. Philip smiled sideways, unsurprised by her questioning. "Yes, Clara. Things are not as simple as they seem. But in the end, everything went as expected. They thought they had control, but I was always ahead." He seemed to enjoy the mystery, but Clara, still trying to regain control of her emotions, was mentally exhausted. "Why did you bring me to this? I just wanted to experience a night of luxury and glamour. And now I find myself in the middle of something I never imagined." He got a little closer, his tone softer, but still with that characteristic enigma. "You, Clara, are much more than you appear to be. Your boldness in infiltrating here caught my attention. It's not every day that someone enters this world so skillfully. I knew you weren't who everyone thought, but I decided to keep you for close because I recognized the potential. That night revealed something to you, didn't it?" Philip's gaze was intense, and Clara, even confused, felt a strange attraction to that man who always seemed to be in control. Clara took a deep breath. "What now? What happens from here? Do I go back to my normal life? Do I forget about that night as if nothing had happened?" Philip laughed lightly, shaking his head. "No, Clara, it's not that simple. You saw and were part of something big. Your life will never be the same unless you choose to stay in this game. I'm offering you a choice. You can go back to your ordinary routine, or you can accept a place by my side, where the world you've always dreamed of will no longer be just a distant wish." Philip's proposal took her completely by surprise. He was suggesting that she come into his life, not just as a spectator, but as someone who would be part of that universe full of intrigue, power, and secrets. The glamour and luxury that Clara craved were now within her reach, but she knew the price would be high. What was Philip really offering? And what would be the consequences of accepting? Clara looked at him, feeling a mixture of fascination and fear. "What if I accept? What happens to me?" Philip stared at her, realizing she was seriously considering the offer. "If you accept, you will have access to a world you never imagined. But it won't be easy. The game we play is dangerous, and once in, there is no turning back. However, I can guide you, teach you how to survive and thrive in this environment. With me, you will have the chance to change your life forever. But it takes courage." The question hung in the air for a few moments, and Clara felt the magnitude of the choice she was about to make. This was the chance she always wanted, the chance to escape ordinary life and live the reality she had always observed from afar. But at the same time, she knew that if she entered this world, she would have to deal with dangers she never imagined. Philip was right, she would have to be brave. She took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. The lure of the unknown, of the power and luxury it promised, was too tempting to ignore. Finally, Clara responded in a firm voice. "I accept. I'm game." Philip smiled, satisfied with his decision. "Good. Now the real moves begin." From the moment Clara accepted Philip's offer, her life changed radically. The young woman who had infiltrated the event, just to have a night of luxury, was now immersed in a world of intrigue, power, and dangerous moves. Philip slowly introduced her to his close circle, made up of influential figures from the world of business and politics. He trained her not only to understand the dynamics of this universe, but also to be a skilled and controlled player, someone who could move in the shadows and manipulate situations to her advantage. Clara, always attentive and determined, absorbed everything quickly. She became a constant presence at Philip's side at important events and meetings, always maintaining the facade of being his fiancé. What was once a lie was now a crucial part of his new identity. Philip taught her how to deal with people, how to observe subtleties in conversations, how to identify weaknesses, and how to use this information to her advantage. She was a dedicated student, and Philip seemed impressed by her quickness in learning. In a short time, Clara went from being the insecure young woman who posed as Philip's fiancée to infiltrating a party. Now, she was a confident woman who knew the rules of the game and knew how to play on equal terms with the most powerful figures in the country. Her transformation was remarkable, both for her and those who knew her. Clara knew she was entering deeper into a dangerous world, but the thrill of living a life full of challenge and power was irresistible. However, Clara's rise in this new world did not come without sacrifices. His previous life, simple and peaceful, was left behind. She cut ties with former friends and distanced herself from her family, knowing they would never understand what her life had become. The price of living in that luxurious world was loneliness and constant vigilance. Clara knew that with every step she took, there was someone watching, waiting for a mistake that could cost her dearly. Philip, in turn, continued to be an intriguing and mysterious presence in his life. Although they maintained the facade of a perfect couple to the public, their relationship was much more complex. Philip respected Clara's intelligence and ambition, but there were times when she realized that he saw her as a pawn in his game. He was always careful not to reveal everything, maintaining an air of mystery that made her suspicious. Despite everything, Clara knew that Philip was both her mentor and her biggest challenge. Over time, Clara began to understand that true power in Philip's world came not just from wealth or influence, but from the ability to control information. The game was about manipulation, secrets, and constantly shifting alliances. Philip taught her to never completely trust anyone, not even him. She was alone in many ways, but her determination to make it in this world kept her going. However, Clara was under no illusions. She knew that her time in that role as Philip's bride would not be eternal. Eventually, the game would change, and she would have to be prepared to make her own moves. She didn't know when that would happen, but she felt that she was getting closer and closer to the moment when she would have to choose between continuing by Philip's side or forging her own path. Clara was transformed, but she knew the real test was yet to come. In the game she was involved in, only the most cunning survived, and she was determined to be one of those people. The time Clara spent with Philip was full of challenges, learning, and dangers. She had become a skilled player, but she knew that the world she lived in did not allow anyone to stay in the same position for long. The feeling that something big was about to happen constantly surrounded her, and with each new event or meeting, she felt that the endgame that Philip was orchestrating was approaching. And this time, Clara knew she would have to make her riskiest move. Philip, always shrouded in his mystery and control, seemed to be preparing something great. He increasingly included her in his decisions, entrusting her with sensitive information and ambitious plans. However, Clara noticed that he was also more distant, as if he was evaluating his own moves and considering the future of the game. It was in this climate of tension that Clara made a crucial decision. She needed to prepare for the moment when she would have to act alone, without Philip by her side. One night, after an important event attended by powerful figures from the government and business world, Clara and Philip returned to his luxurious apartment. The silence between the two was different from usual. Clara knew Philip was waiting for something, perhaps even daring her to take action. "Are you ready to take the next step?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence with a cryptic question. Clara, without hesitation, replied, "Yes, I'm ready." Philip smiled, but his eyes revealed nothing. He got up and walked to a table where there were confidential documents and folders. "There's something you need to know," he said, as he picked up one of the documents and handed it to Clara. "This is my greatest plan. If it succeeds, we will dominate not just this country, but other international markets as well. But if we fail, well, let's just say there is no room for error. Clara looked at the document in her hands, aware that this was Philip's final move, and possibly hers as well. That night, Clara stayed in her suite, reflecting on Philip's proposal. The plan was risky, complex, and involved powerful names. If she accepted, she would have to go all the way without turning back. However, something inside her made her question whether this was the right move. Philip had trained Clara to be a skilled player, but also to distrust everything and everyone, including him. Was he testing her once again? Or perhaps he was ready to eliminate her from the game as soon as she became expendable. The next morning brought new clarity to Clara. As she looked out the window at the city, she understood that the time had come to make her final move. She would no longer be a pawn in Philip's game. Instead, she would be the strategist. Using everything she had learned, she devised her own plan. He knew that, to survive, he would have to free himself from Philip's influence and take complete control of his life. That night, Clara confronted Philip, revealing her own plan to leave that world and start a new life, free from his influence. Philip, although surprised, respected her courage. "You finally understand what it means to play this game," he said, with an intriguing smile. "But know that once you are out, there will be no going back." Clara, with a confidence she had never felt before, replied, "I know, and I'm ready for it." With her final move, Clara said goodbye to that world full of secrets and power. Although luxury and glamour were still tempting, she now knew that true power lay in living her own truth, without allowing herself to be manipulated by anyone. Philip's game was over for her, but Clara knew she was just beginning her own.